Greetings. Welcome to the second segment of a three-part series on the history of Arthington, a small town in Liberia that has had a huge impact on the country and beyond. Now, if you're a keen observer, you probably have seen this same cup that I had in the last episode, and you might be wondering what's in it. Well, if you are, all I can say is, people go mind your business, people go mind your business, people go mind your business, nobody business but mine. Well, let me stop joking around and return to sharing three fascinating revelations about Arthington. One of them might shock you. First is a brief sketch of Robert Arthington, the Englishman after whom the town was named. The second is the story of how the town was created. And third, some colorful details about a few of the town's early leaders. So let's get started. The town Arthington was named after an Englishman named Robert Arthington. His neighbors called him eccentric, but I would rather say that he marched to a different drummer. They gave him the nickname the millionaire miser, meaning someone who's stingy. Well, in Liberia, we would say that he cared about others, but he was mean to himself. Robert was born to a wealthy family. Their money came from a brewery that they owned. The family were members of the Society of Friends, a Christian denomination that refused to bear arms or join the army. They detested slavery, and they advocated moderate use of tobacco and alcohol. As alcohol abuse increased in British society, Robert's father decided to sell the brewery out of a sense of guilt that he was profiting from a sinful product. Robert was the only son in a family with 4 children. He attended Cambridge University and was a very good student, but he dropped out before receiving his diploma. In his 20s, Arthington left his family's denomination to become a devout Baptist. In 1864, Arthington inherited about $1 million when his father died. He decided to pour his wealth into good causes, including hospitals and fighting slavery. But his main priority was support for missionaries. In the 1800s, many Christians, including Arthington, believed they could hasten the second coming of Christ by spreading the gospel to as many people around the world who had never heard it. Arthington's deep Christian and anti-slavery motivations led him to fund the repatriation of those immigrants from South Carolina and Georgia who founded the town in Liberia that bears his name. When he made his donation to the American Colonization Society, he instructed the organization to establish an inland community, quote, consisting as much as possible of men of missionary spirit and deeply and prayerfully interested in the moral redemption of all Africa, end quote. He added, I am set for the redemption, the deliverance from the curse of slavery, and the evangelization of Africa. In 1869, shortly after the town was established, Queen Victoria appointed Robert Arthington as the consul for the Republic of Liberia in Leeds, his hometown. Let's go then to the second part of this video, which relates to the founding of the community. Arthington is located on terrain that is hilly and uneven. It lies about 2 miles in from the St. Paul River and 4 miles northwest of Millsburg. The site selected for Arthington was previously impenetrable forest. This is from the scholar Edward Wilmot Blyden. He said, the only sounds to be heard were those made by birds on the tops of lofty trees. There are no openings through the thick forest and dense undergrowth, but the narrow path that had been traveled for generations. First group of 79 repatriates was led by Alonzo Huggard. They came from Windsor, North Carolina. In December 1869, they landed in Liberia, while the women and children stayed in Monrovia. The men began clearing the land in March 1870. They had to contend with, quote, the unbroken wilderness, make clearings, and build their huts, eating the fare which, after dividing with their families, was left to them from the American Colonization Society's rations, end quote. Like many repatriates from the U.S. who came after the American Civil War, those who settled Arthington were poor when they arrived. But, as was noted by the New Era newspaper in Liberia, they were, quote, intelligent, active, industrious, and enterprising, end quote. 3 noteworthy leaders who emerged in the community were Alonzo Huggard, Solomon York, and Richard Rayner. Their progress was described by a visitor who arrived skeptical but left impressed. Huggard, for example, had, quote, no assistance, no aid, but 4 small sons, and with them alone, he has planted out 5,000 coffee trees and is cultivating 1.5 acres in potatoes, 2 acres in cassava, 4 acres in rice, 1/2 acre in edos, besides many garden vegetables. He also had 8 hogs. Within 3 years, York had nearly 3,000 coffee trees growing, and many were already bearing. And he had a large supply of cassavas, arrows, and other bread stuff. Rayner, too, had planted a large lot of coffee. He also had, quote, some acres of sugar cane, some ginger, and his wife offers to sell a few barrels of Indian corn, the result of her own industry, end quote. The first group was joined in 1871 by repatriates from Clay Hill, South Carolina. They were led by Elias Hill. The second group included Jefferson Bracewell, Solomon Hill, and June Moore, who together formed one of the country's most prosperous trading companies. According to Edward Wilmot Blyden, again, a frequent visitor to Arthington, some members of this second group knew the African ethnic groups to which they were connected. Hill was one. His mother was Gola, he said, and his father was from an ethnic group along the Niger River. With the aid of his 7 sons, Bracewell cleared and planted 30 acres in 1 year. A visitor in 1873 noted he had, quote, 1,100 coffee trees, made a large crop of rice, potatoes, arrows, so as to supply his own family. He then imported a sugar mill and made his own sugar and syrup. He has made a large coffee nursery, this observer said, and is now tanning some of the best leather that is used in this country. Bracewell had been so perpetually busy, a reporter for the New Era newspaper joked that he had no time to get sick. Quote, his wife and daughter spin and weave all the cloth that he and his boys wear, and he has built with his own hands his own dwelling house, his outside storehouse, a weaving and loom house for his wife, and a house for tanning leather. Even more successful was Solomon Hill. Hill was a carpenter, a cabinet maker, a blacksmith, and a farmer who could neither read nor write. He arrived in 1871 with $30, all of which he spent to build his first temporary house and to plant foodstuff. His eventual home was described as a large, quote, 2-story frame building with veranda and attic and outhouses covered on the roofs and the side with corrugated iron. A visitor called the furniture Hill built, quote, specimens of first-rate workmanship and being made of native wood procured on his land. The furniture is superior, far superior, to anything of its kind that could be imported. His skill would command patronage in any city in the world, unquote. As a blacksmith, Hill made his own tools. Quote, his lathe for turning wood and iron was constructed by himself in a very simple but effective style. Another community leader was Reverend June Moore, who reportedly received most of his religious training in Liberia. He told a visitor he knew nothing of religion in America. He belonged to a Presbyterian family, but he had no religious impressions until he came to Africa. Here, he became a Christian, joined the Baptist Church, entered the ministry, and by 1873, he was elected pastor of the Baptist Church. So, what happened to Robert, after whom the town that bears his name was established in Liberia? Around 1870, his life took a dramatic turn. He moved from the home his parents had left him and built a large, commodious new home for himself and the woman he had fallen in love with. But she spurned his offer of marriage. After Arthington's devastating heartbreak, his neighbors said no one ever saw him smile. If anyone said hello, his response was, "How is your soul?" His street attire consisted of his father's old top hat and black suits that had turned green from age. The dye had faded from them. Arthington retreated into a strange and reclusive life. In the words of one writer, quote, he lived and slept wrapped in his coat in only one room, sunless, unheated, thick with dust, lit by just one candle, while the rest of the house remained unoccupied. He donated his entire fortune. He received almost no visitors. People were briskly turned away if they came and tried to visit. While living alone, Arthington continued his generous support of missionaries and other charities. Meanwhile, his wealth kept growing due to smart investments, including investments in the new expanding railroads in America. In 1900, Arthington died quietly in his sleep after a long illness. He donated his entire fortune to missionary organizations. His estate was worth $5 million at the time. Well, returning for a minute to what's in my cup, I just want to say for now that it is related to the history of Arthington. I will reveal the content in the third and final video. So please come back and share this video and others with those you know from Arthington or who you think might be interested in this story. See you next time. Some say she hobojo, some say she wabaja. If I consent to marry her, nobody business but mine. People, go my business. People, go my business. People, go my business.